And this is kind of what I thought when I was like, because we wanted to do behind the scenes. Because I was like, I always, when I was first starting out, like, that was so valuable to me.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't just, I want to see a pretty finished product. I was like, I want to know how they made the pretty finished product. And so we knew we wanted to do behind the scenes, but I think after filming, just the way we had our conversations was so interesting that I was like, let's just do a conversation more than just show.
Right.
Behind the scenes.
I love that. I think that that's really valuable because then you get insights into how the heck this even formed. I think if you see behind the scenes, you see it already in action. You don't see the birth of it. So to have us talk about it is cool.
Because we're surrounded by pretty finished products. But those pretty finished products at some point were just
in a
ideas.
Black box. Yeah. They were
a bunch of people
ricocheting around
at 10 o'clock at night dropping ideas on like a Zoom call.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so cool. And I love that there are different, like, this isn't just specific to me. I love that this is specific to the other experiences that were had in the collaborative process, that people with the car scene or just being in the woods or turning to creating when you're sad. And I think it's cool. She couldn't take them through it all. People change, trees grow tall.
I'm Joella Marie with Creative Voices, and this is Chlöe Mae, and she is a songwriter. I want to call you a songwriter storyteller who then sings them.
That sounds I'm very honored. A storyteller is kind of the best job ever.
And you wrote an EP, and we made that into a small film, and we just really enjoyed the process of making that, so we wanted to talk a little bit more about it, the album, and how we brought it to life in a short film.
Yeah.
I had the idea for this short film, and it was this very unfleshed out idea of I wanted to find an artist who had a song, and I wanted to take that and make it into a short film.
Yeah.
And I had just recorded a video about journeys and seasons, and we were introduced literally, I think it was like the same week. So I recorded it on Sunday, and we had our first meeting on Friday. And you sat down, and I was just like, oh, nice to meet you.
Right.
What's your album about? And you were like, oh, it's about this season of life and this tough journey. And I was just like, oh, my God.
It was wild. Amanda, my pianist, reached out and was like, hey, I was on set. I met this creative director, and she has this idea for a film. And kind of explained, she was like, she wants to talk about seasons. And I said that I have the perfect person for you. And anyway, so when we met up, I really had no real idea of what exactly we were meeting to talk about. I just knew that you had an idea of something to do, and that I had an idea, and that they kind of like corresponded pretty well. And when I said seasons and started talking about that, immediately after you were like, this is crazy. And I saw Amanda doing
yeah, she was the genius.
Yeah.
We would not be here without her introduction.
Yeah.
Which is funny that I even had mentioned it to her because it was on like a commercial project and just kind of was like, oh, I have this, because she was talking about music and getting back into doing more music.
Right.
And I was like, I have this idea. And like I said, I do this often where I have an idea and I almost store it as this like half-baked thing. And I knew that when I found the right person, I wanted to flesh it out more, but it wasn't this full idea. It was this, how can we make this short film and tie it in with a song and make it this like expanded music video with like more of a character arc to it.
And it's wild because this is a project that I care the most about in any of my music that I've ever done. It feels, and I've told you this, it feels the most true to the sound and the brand that I want to create for myself. And I wanted it to be different and distinct from my other releases, but I didn't have the money or the connections to try to find somebody who had a similar idea or who had like an incentive to pursue creating content about that.
And it happened to hit just right at the right time for me because I'm transitioning from paid commercial work to original creative content. Like not getting paid to make something that serves a purpose for someone else, but just I have these ideas and I want to make something and I want to create it the way I want it to look and I want to put it out into the world.
Yes.
And so it was a really, not just an alignment of topic, but this really fortuitous timing as well.
Exactly. Especially because the whole album and the short film covers some pretty in-depth topics just about relationships, familial, platonic, romantic. It talks about connection. It talks about a lot of lessons that I've learned in the past year and a half. So to find somebody who was pursuing a film that had to do with teaching people about creativity and these lessons was crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And yeah, it really came together really quickly too, which is strange. Having done a lot of creative projects, they often are these labors of love and they take a lot of time. So for the fact that I've had this idea for a long time kind of sitting back there, we pulled it off really fast. I mean, it came together really quickly.
We started, the very first conversation was, I think, less than a month ago.
Yeah.
Was it a month ago?
Yeah.
And now we're here talking about it. It's crazy to me.
How fast it went. And how alignment of vision and ideas there was.
I don't know if you've had this experience, and tell me if you have, because I feel like there are a lot of these times with other creatives when you talk about an idea, you get so excited about it and you have this game plan and then it kind of just
peters out.
and falls to the wayside. So to see it through, I mean, the next week we were talking about, on a meeting, talking about what we were going to, the logistics.
But it did happen so quickly that it was like all these extra hours. So we were on like Google Meet calls at like 9 o'clock at night because that was like the only time everyone had.
Sunday at like sunrise.
Yeah,
like
we did test shots Sunday.
Ambiguous
sunrise
times.
Yeah, so we squeezed it in. But you have a song on the album about leaves falling. And we were right in this middle of autumn.
Fall,
so we were kind of like, this is our window.
Yeah.
Like it fits what I'm doing. It fits the song and the feel of what you've made. Yeah. It's now or never. Like, let's go.
How divinely orchestrated that it happened to be in a time where we were like, we have to get started. Yeah. It wasn't just us telling ourselves that. It was, seasons are fading and we need to get out.
So seasons, the thing about them is they end.
They end and
winter is coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So how is this process, writing these songs, different than things you've made before?
It's been much more collaborative, which is something I was really shut off to for years. I viewed songwriting as my journal, and it always will be, and it always is and has been. But the thing about your journal is nobody reads it, and it's just you writing it. And so in the spring, I had been in a really big bout of creative ideas. I didn't want to be creative. I didn't have this desire to do that. I had been through a lot of changes in the last year and a half, but I had no desire to write about them just because I didn't know the words to write about them. And my producer reached out to me and said, hey, I think you should come over for some writing sessions. I haven't seen you in a little while, and you've been through a few things. I think we should talk about them. And he introduced me to the idea of co-writing and collaborating. And I had done it before, but not to the extent that this was. I walked in, there were 5 people in a room, and it was a therapy session. I mean, it was
digging down into.
Yes, there were tears. There was people talking about trauma and different things, and we got to pull from everybody's experiences that added to the one that I was having.
Were you surprised by how much you had in common with other people in the room?
Yes.
Like these hard things that feel like this isolated experience, but then you start talking about them and they're not.
Yeah. I would say everybody in that room had been through some life change in the last year. And while each experience was different, we could sum it up by talking about seasons, because everybody has them. It is a human experience to have seasons of happiness and seasons of success, and then seasons of depression and seasons of loss. And that was the one thing that we all had in common, despite the differences that we, in the specifics of the circumstances.
And one thing I had been talking about in the content I was making coming into this was seasons of kind of planting and seasons of harvest. This idea that like you have to plant things and tend to them, and then there comes a day later where you get to reap the reward of that. And I think that an interesting thing about your album is that you had this really hard time, and in a weird way, that was like a seed planted, though.
Yeah.
And then it came to this harvest, which was the album of, like, you walked through this really difficult season, and it came to, like, something creative.
Yes.
And this shared expression of what that season looked like at the end.
And I always knew hard experiences were, there was some greater purpose and some reason for it. But to view it as that kind of an investment for some creative work to come out of it was really
you chose to see it as like that seed.
Yeah.
Like, I went through this, and now how can I put words to it? How can I dive into this hard time artistically?
Which also makes you view it in a different light. I think that had I written this when I was in the thick of a lot of different life changes, the entire tone of the album would have been much more sour. But this...
Given some time.
Yes, this was hindsight. This was... and that's the beauty of talking about seasons, is that you don't super fully appreciate them until they're over. And I liked touching on that in the sense that enjoy every part that you are in, because you will look back and be like, I understand why this happened. I understand why I lost this person, or I understand why I learned this lesson.
Or even just... I'm appreciative of the person I am today, and I am the person I am because I walked through those hard times. Not that I have any fondness for them in, like, retrospect.
I wouldn't ever want to do it again, but
I like the person I've become. And I think Ernest Hemingway said that. Like, we're all broken, but that's how the light gets in. And I think we kind of, at least for me, I kind of used that idea with the story you told of how the album came together. To kind of start building into the film.
Yeah.
And originally, my original idea was, like, one song with dialogue kind of through. So, like, a song stretched into a short film.
We
but
talked
then
about
you
that.
had this entire EP, 5 songs. So we wanted to build the film with all 5 of them in there. And because it was this idea of the person you were writing the album had been through these hard seasons. I think one of the first things we as a group kind of coalesced around was these metaphors for the journey. Which was like car, tires, roads, feet, paths. Like, all of these metaphors for these times in life when you're moving through things.
And that metaphors have been, I mean, they are consistent in most music, but especially in this project. That was the first thing we talked about in the studio as well, was each song has something to do, has some motif in it that has to do with the lesson. So we have leaves, we have cars, like we talked about, we have fire, we have seasons. And I think elaborating on these metaphors makes it much more of a human experience, because it's not specific. It's very much like, everybody goes through this, and that's beautiful, and that's okay. So,
and hopefully triggering those kind of moments for people and making them kind of find, like, oh, that happened to me too. Something like that happened. And I think we were talking before we started filming about kids and how kids are very just open and creative and curious. And I think as adults, we learn to put on masks. And so while we might be going through something, we learn not to show it.
Yes.
And so one of the things we wanted to do in the film is kind of like, if you were alone, when you don't have that mask on, what does it look like to be walking through a season like this?
Yes. And it's interesting because that vulnerability was very hard to tap into, both visually and in the studio. I didn't want to go to those writing sessions because I didn't want to tap into that. And I was scared to show emotion on screen because I don't tap into that very often.
Because it's scary.
It's totally scary.
Like, going back to that place.
Yes. And doing it without boundaries and without imagining. I think because up until that point, and ironically there were people there, that was like the first time where I was prompted to experience these feelings that I hadn't been able to.
You've been kind of running away from.
Yes, or given myself the chance to experience. Yeah. So.
Did it surprise you how things came out the other side. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you have these experiences that are all tangled up and they don't have words and you don't even know how to tell somebody about them. And then you kind of work through them and get to a song.
Yeah. Yes, I think I thought that my masking was healing and that I was healed and that I didn't have these emotions anymore. But when I was told to tap into them in the writing room and in front of the camera, it was so much more apparent to me how much I was affected by this stuff. Even though it had been a year ago, 6 months ago, I think because I put on a face for people around me, like we said, masking, and I didn't allow myself to fully experience these emotions, I didn't understand that there was a little more baggage to them than I had previously thought.
Yeah. And so we wanted to so the film is very kind of quiet and like lonely in this like behind the scenes, like just walk with someone through this season of life. What surprised you about the filmmaking process, I guess, bringing it to life?
Yeah. That's a really good question. First of all, it was so fun. It was so fun.
Yes, to have people tell you to remember all the hard things you went through.
No, it was cool. Like, especially when you're surrounded by creatives, it's much more comforting.
Yeah.
Because I feel like every creative has been jaded or is jarred by something that has happened in their life. So even though I had met you guys, like, that was the first time I met you guys in person, I felt very at ease. Yeah, I felt very at ease. And I also really loved to see how invested everybody was, even though nobody's getting paid, like we talked about. This is a complete passion project.
This is a original content, which is the opposite of commercial work, which is when someone pays you to make them something. And this is the opposite, when no one pays you, but you make something anyway.
Right. I mean, we were showing up there at sunrise on a Sunday, and I wasn't super aware of what equipment would be brought, but we pulled up, and you guys were, like, unloading the car and doing stuff, and it is clearly such a love for it in this film, both musically, visually, and that was so clear throughout all of the behind the scenes, and that was really cool.
So visually, behind the scenes, we were working on, like, what do we, you know we want this fall, but it's this sad season of fall, and how do we want to bring that to life? So we were talking about really technical things like lenses and filters, and we were like, okay, I think we want to use a filter to soften the light to give this kind of glow to it. And so we went out and did film tests. And afterwards, we were kind of combing through footage, and there was this shot of you, which ended up being the kind of emotional center point of the short film. And we pulled it up, and I was like, okay, like, let me pull it to this song. And I thought I was going to do song 2, and I kind of put it up with it, and I was like, that's not right. And then we did song 3, and we faded it in. And that for me was the moment.
Crazy.
And we talk about the black box of creating, where it's like, I have this idea. I found these people, like, it's fitting really well, but we still don't entirely know what we're going to get on the other side of this. Like, we're putting all this time into it. We're putting all this attention into it. What are we going to get? And I think for me, that was the moment when I was like, oh, we're going to make something.
Yes.
Okay, it's going to happen. Like, we're doing it, and, like, something really powerful and really honest is going to come out the other side.
Yeah. That was interesting to me because I hadn't viewed filmmaking really in any light before because I had no experience or very little. But to be there and to see every single decision being deliberate was interesting to me. The lens, you were saying, this evokes this emotion, this evokes this emotion. Our background conversations talking about, okay, this is what you want to feel in this scene, but then also delving into it. It wasn't just look sad. It was, what do we want to convey to the audience? It was the camera angle. It was having, if we wanted people in the background or not. It's so deliberate, and I think every choice made in it was intentional to evoke some sort of emotion, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think that we wanted people to feel connected to this character. Like, it was ambiguous enough of what was happening that they kind of, it triggers some memory for anyone watching it, but we still wanted it to be beautiful because I think that's the irony of when things are falling apart too, is like the sun still comes up. There are sunrises and like beauty still happens, And we filmed up in the mountains. And we were like I said, we're moving on this. We're trying to get in. And it almost is past the peak of fall. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the leaves had fallen on the day we shot up there. And I ended up really liking that. And I wanted it to be like full, beautiful fall colors. And then I was like, this mix of like, it's beautiful and vibrant, but kind of also like clear that it's dying.
Yes. I loved that.
Beautiful.
And that's what's cool is we tend to romanticize these obviously beautiful parts of nature and of life. I mean, fall is beautiful, and you can say that there's beauty in the death of these leaves and stuff, or something a little less morbid. But the fact that we kind of chose a time that was kind of random. And obviously we didn't have a lot of freedom in choosing when we could, but you're right, it's past the prime of when the leaves are beautiful. And there are some leaves on the ground and some trees are bare, but there are some trees with leaves, makes it so much more relatable because there is no perfect timing for these emotions or events or anything.
Yeah. I had this idea for a long time. And obviously when you have ideas, like you were excited about them. Mm-hmm. But this one was special in a different way. And it just kind of, I think that the alignment of everyone who came together to work on this, and we went so quickly, and we got this like beautiful, crisp fall day at the very end of fall, and we're up in the mountains filming, and this opportunity to kind of take pieces of, and so even in the brainstorming process, like we were all talking about like what are people going through, and we all pulled in our own pieces of like, oh, when life was hard,
right,
like I did this thing. And so like in the film we have this character drives and sits in the same spot every day. And that came from the brainstorming session of one person being like, there's this season of life where I cried in my car at lunch every single day. And I think that trying to make it honest and trying to allow it to be something that people could kind of connect with.
Yeah.
In a way that I think just making a film or just making music, like neither can kind of do completely. And so being able to bring them together, I feel like not just making a short film about a hard season of life, but having the music in it.
Yes.
And then not just having an album about a hard time in life, but being able to like visually have a character illustrate that. That's really interesting.
Cool too is that, like I said, none of us are, this is complete passion project. And where would everybody be if they were doing the exact same thing? Creating just for the sake of creating, because we happened to just meet and everything aligned because we had this same goal of creating for the sake of creating. And I think if more people did that, we would increase that amount of collaboration and increase understanding among people and among humans. And
well, and it's just fascinating to think. Like, what would people make?
Right.
If they weren't worried about it paying the bills or it being liked, like, what would people create? And I think that that's the interesting piece is, you know, not being a musician, I got to take something beautiful that you made and use it as a seed for something that I make.
Right.
And, like, you think of that on a really large scale. Like, someone makes something and it helps someone else make something. And
I think the most powerful and impactful creative works I've seen are ones that are done by people who have, like, who have less than 10,000 followers or something, who aren't doing it for a deadline or for a budget. They're doing it just because they want to say something.
They want to make something. They want to say something.
There are a few creatives that I know that just create the most beautiful pieces of any medium of art because they want to. And that's what makes it the most beautiful, which is cool.
Yeah. And so we did a little bit of that here, which you're always really lucky when you get to just make something to make something.
I know.
But I guess at the end, like, what do you hope people take away? Like, they watch the film, they hear the songs, they see. What do you hope people take from this?
Gosh, there are so many things. I think musically and just in watching the film, I hope people take away the idea of seasons and that's pretty freaking cool. That it's beautiful that bad times will come and that bad times will end. And it's beautiful that good times will come and that good times will end. And as cheesy as it is, people say, oh, you have the bad times so that you can appreciate the good times. And it's true. Everything that happens in your life will come to an end, and that is beautiful.
Well, I mean, do we enjoy fall because it's beautiful, or do we enjoy fall because we know it's temporary?
Exactly.
Like it's going to end, and that puts this urgency to go out and see and appreciate and witness something.
And I also hope in people seeing the behind the scenes and this, that they feel a little more of a drive to be creative. Like we were talking about, that there's no reason that you should have to be creative other than to just do it.
Yeah. If it sparks an idea, do something about it.
Right.
Like we're genuinely curious. Like what are people going to make?
Yes, and I think there are so many people that label themselves. They go, I'm not creative. I'm not a creative. I am not I just can't do that. I think any human that has a brain can create something.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a song or a film. It can just be literally anything. It could be creating a business, creating anything that is from your own ideas. And I think if we promote that more, I think that would do a lot of good.
Making things. I think we are meant to make things. I think we are here to put into things and see them grow and see them turn into something else.
Right.
And often that thing we want it to turn into is money.
Right.
But if you step past that, I think the thing you want it to turn into is something that you're proud of, that makes you feel like you're using your life.
Yes.
It's giving you some inherent value outside of just commercial value, but it's also connecting you with other people.
Yeah, we have a line in the last song that says planting seeds to leave before we watch them grow. And I love that, because that is what creating is. You might not see the end of where your creation goes.
Or the ripples of...
Yes, exactly. You are casting a stone into a lake, and that's all you're doing, and you're waiting for it to do its work. And that's what this is I don't know who this will reach. I don't know who this will resonate with, but I know that whoever it does resonate with will create ripples from there, and that in itself is really cool.
It's valuable.
Right.
It was worth getting up at sunrise to go do film tests to get this right. Yeah, so I think we did put we've put a lot of work into it. And I think in the past on things I've done, I've tried to keep them really contained. Like, we'll just do it in an afternoon here. Like, it's just this, extra project. We have this full plate of things. And we didn't do that here, which I think shows in the finished product that it was a lot of hours for everybody. This was not a cutting corners thing. This was truly for the creating of it.
See it through. Right. I think that's so cool.
But I think it did. It's almost hard to convey how much fun it was to do.
Right.
And it was hard because we were conveying a hard season.
I know. It's ironic. But
even then, I think we all felt really excited to be there.
Oh, yeah. No, nobody had to be there, which made it so much more valuable. Yeah. I mean, one of the people on set was a mom with an infant.
At home, yeah.
Who did not have any reason that she should not be asleep at that time.
And she was there. And she did all of the wardrobe.
Right.
And had everything lined up. And
yeah. The networking it brings is really cool. Not just in, and I love that we are emphasizing this because it's true, not just in making a monetary profit, but just in meeting other people who have like-minded ideas, which is, if Amanda hadn't said anything, this would never have happened. None of this would have happened.
And how sad that would be.
Oh my gosh. Tragic. This is so cool. Oh my gosh. I couldn't even. Well, and it's also, like we said earlier, every bad experience happens for a reason. It does. Totally does. Every season ends and every season connects you.
And even bad things that shouldn't happen. They really shouldn't.
No.
But you can take that and use it as this jumping off point of empathy and compassion and connection and art and all of these squiggly squishy emotions that are so hard to put words to. And I think that that's the fun thing about the film is that you put words to these squishy things and then we got to put visuals to them as well.
What an awesome pairing.
Yeah. And I think what I said when we showed up on the like final shoot day up in the mountains, ready to go, got everybody there, and it was just like, we get to make something today.
Yes.
That's one of the good days. We
And
get
how
to make
cool.
something.
How cool.
So we're not going to be stressed. We're not going to be worried. We're just going to go and make something.
And we did.
We did. And that's the good days.
I know.
And now we get to talk about the thing we made.
Right. Oh.
But no, I'm really grateful you wrote that album.
Thanks.
It's beautiful and it feels honest.
Right.
And I think that that's what we wanted to do justice, making a film
Well,
about
I'm
it.
thankful you had this idea and that you went through the experiences that you did to be here. It's been awesome.
I don't want to jinx it, but I am a little like, what are we going to make together in the
I know.
future?
I'm like, so I'll text you.
Like,
Anyway.
what's the next thing
I
we're
know,
going to
that's
make?
what I was thinking. I'm like, well, I'll get back in the studio. Let's start making something else.
And we'll make something else.
Yeah.
The next thing. So until next time.
I'm just kidding. Some awful sign off. Till next time.
I always do that, and then I have to do the second and third takes.
Yeah.
I end with something really cheesy. It's like my go-to.
Stay classy, San Francisco. It's like from Anchorman.
Yeah.
You know, some sign off.
Yeah.
Cool.